This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, April the 30th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's produced the program. We are looking forward to speaking with you this morning on a topic of your choosing. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. A quick check-in with the Under-18 Men's Hockey Championship, World Hockey Championships. So there's a local component, that's why I'm giving it a shout-out this morning. Canada undefeated 4-0 after a 7-1 victory over Norway yesterday. Today entering the quarterfinals against the Czechs. And the head coach, Travis Crickard from St. John's. He also coached in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League with the St. John's Sea Dogs, Memorial Cup champion, and making his way nicely through the coaching ranks. Head coach for Canada's U18s, pretty great. And just a quick good luck to Abby Newhook. So Abby, of course, captain at Boston College, had a standout career at Boston College. She's now signed on to a management company and so will be eligible to be drafted into the upcoming Professional Women's Hockey League draft. So good luck to her. And if you want to give me an update on some other local athletes doing big things, you know what to do. Send me a note. Happy to give them a shout out. All right, little baseball. On this date, 1939, Lou Gehrig set the Major League Baseball record for playing in his 2,130th consecutive game and final game for the New York Yankees. That record stood for 56 years until Cal Ripken, of course, came along, Cal Ripken Jr., and he broke it and they eventually played in 2,632 games. How far away are those two from anyone else in Major League history? Number 3 on the list, Everett Scott. He played from 1916 to 1925 and suited up in 1,307 consecutive games. So those records that are always set to be broken so quick, that one you can put it away, I'm pretty sure. All right, I think we're anticipating a conversation with Karen Sheriffs, one of the organizers of the Canada Summer Games. Of course, coming to the city and surrounding area this August. I believe the opening ceremony is around the 8th. It's 100 days out. So we'll have a chat with Ms. Sheriffs about where we are, whether it be on the quest for 5,000 volunteers. Apparently they have 4,000, so another 1,000 in short order. We'll see what they can pull off on that front, and we'll get an infrastructure update and those types of things. And if you have some questions, we can talk about it. But the games themselves are huge. I mean, I know some people are concerned with money being spent on things like this. I personally, as you can predict, I think it's a good idea. So 4,200 participants across the country, 244 events, 19 sports. Estimated economic impact in and around $125 million. Nothing like a shot in the arm with money being spent by people who are not from the province. So inside the 4,200 participants, here comes their families. Well, not for every athlete, but certainly for some. So 100 days out from the games. And lovely ceremony yesterday out in Paradise, recognizing and celebrating the life of young J.D. Traynor, 16-year-old who died with cancer earlier this year. So the town got together and now they're going to name a street in the community as J.D. Traynor Street. So lovely recognition. And of course, the family, just relatively new to Paradise, and of course, JD played for the Paradise Warriors. They've only been in the community for 7 years, but of course, this is a big deal, and I'm sure they were quite pleased with it. All right, so final day of May. May is Mental Health Month. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see and hopefully have a bunch of conversations on that front, whether it be with leadership at the Canadian Mental Health Association, Newfoundland and Labrador chapter, and more importantly, or as importantly, from you. So we do know we have a new mental health and addictions facility opened up on the Health Sciences Complex. Now it's being populated with staff and residents and patients. So we'll see how that may hopefully change, a positive change for the delivery of mental health and addictions treatments here in the province. And your personal stories, whether it be about some of the concerns regarding access and long-term care and continuity of care, the conversations are important. And we like to think that we've had an open forum for those types of chats, as difficult as they may be for individuals and or for the general community, but having them, I think, and I hope, has been helpful, so let's continue to do that. And friendly reminder, campaign signs if you were a candidate in the most recent federal election, 72 hours from the closing of the polls to get your signs down. I know there's bigger fish to fry in this country, but I think it's also important to get those cleaned up. All right, let's keep going. So the closest margin of victory in any federal riding across the country was in Terranova, the Peninsulas. And after a long time counting all the ballots that were cast, Anthony Germain, the Liberal candidate, comes out on top over Conservative candidate Jonathan Rowe. Margin of victory, 12 votes. I mean, it's truly remarkable. I heard many people say this morning on the show, talk about the fact that every vote counts, and it certainly does. Like even provincial elections. Remember when Jordan Brown beat Graham Leto? I think by, was it 1 vote or 2 votes, something like that? So Mr. Germain successful, which means 5 Liberal MPs representing the province and 2 Conservatives, being Carol Anstey in the Long Range Mountains, of course, and Clifford Small out in Central. So I don't know what the future holds, but if you're Jonathan Rowe, I would imagine careful consideration of requesting a judicial recount. So as of now, Mr. Germain is headed to Ottawa to represent the folks in Terranova, the Peninsulas. All right, so I do think there's a place for the NDP in the country. I really, truly do. I mean, it's not that long ago they were the official opposition. But the party has really taken an absolute beating in this election, all the way down to 7 seats. No longer qualifying for official party status, which is a huge problem for the party that is going to be forced to rebuild from the inside out. So no federal funding for party research, no opportunity to ask questions in question period, and we know Mr. Singh has stepped down. So it brings upon the thought as to what's going on behind closed doors with the Liberal minority government, because we do have a minority parliament, how the conversations are sounding between representatives of the Liberal Party and the 7 successful NDPers about the possibility of crossing the floor. I don't know if any of that is going to happen, but you know those conversations are happening, so we can talk about that. And the Conservative Party of Canada. So Mr. Singh decided to step down for a variety of reasons, including the fact that he obviously did not bring the party anywhere near where they need to be on the federal front. And for the Conservatives, who overperformed, over 40% of the popular vote, 45% of support in Ontario, whopping support out west, but of course came up short. And with Mr. Poilievre not winning his seat in Carleton, people are asking whether or not he should step down. I don't think he has to, and I'm pretty sure I don't see him going anywhere, to be honest with you. But then there's some silly comments out there about, whether they're coming from Danielle Smith in Alberta. He should stay on, so she says, and fair enough, but he should choose to run in a more winnable riding. More winnable than Carleton, that he held for 20 years and won 7 consecutive elections. So even in that, okay. So it does look and feel strange when there's 91 candidates on a ballot. But the assertion that that was distinctly unfair for Mr. Poilievre is something that I really don't understand. Of course, it is weird. And should there be something done to keep that number of people off a ballot? Your opinion is welcome on that. But the victor, Bruce Vanjoy, was also on a ballot that included 91 people. So I really don't get that pushback. And it's quite predictable, and it was happening even before the election, and the results were known, is the concept of the election being rigged. It's really disappointing and frustrating, and it's only going to get worse when more and more people are willing to believe that the election was rigged. Elections Canada and the amount of scrutiny that goes into casting a ballot and counting the ballots is very rigorous. I would have said the exact same thing if the Rhinos had to win, or the Conservatives had to win, or the Dippers or the Liberals or any party in this country. It's not rigged. It's virtually impossible to rig an election in this country. If you've ever worked at a polling station, and if you have been a district returning officer and want to walk through your experience and how secure your experience is insofar as the integrity of the result, but that's where we are. And a lot of that course started in 2020 down south, is if you don't win, if your preferred party or your side doesn't win, doesn't mean it's rigged. I mean, we have got huge issues to broach in this country. Massive economic policies that have to be implemented, things that have to change, and in short order. So if we're distracted and sidelined and the conversation is derailed by things like the election is rigged, is bad for Canada. It really, truly is. I knew this was coming, even when we talked about the need to have a public inquiry, a judicial inquiry into foreign interference, which has absolutely happened. Bad actors have meddled, not influenced the result insofar as the ballots that have been cast, but getting into the minds and the hearts of Canadian voters, and we see what that's meant. So the conversation about it being rigged is really unfortunate from my perspective. So it would be I worked at a federal election campaign as a pollster, as a worker, not a campaign worker, working for Elections Canada, and it was really stern and really strict and very rigorous. So I don't know why people are so willing to go down that path. Even if you're disappointed or frustrated or angered or disgusted with the result, let's try to get back to a place of normalcy where elections being rigged is not part of the conversation, as opposed to other things we have to deal with. All right. And with the Liberal minority, of course, there's going to be lots of fears stoked or concerns about the fact that the Liberals may, possibly, unlikely, join forces with the Bloc Québécois to put them in a position where they can pass things like a budget and all non-confidence motions. The Bloc have been pretty open. Just as recently as yesterday, Mr. Blanchet saying there is no future for oil and gas in Quebec. And what that means for the proposed East-West energy corridor, even if you think that that is a requirement in this country, just think about the provincial jurisdiction and provincial authority that we would hold very dear to our hearts if it was done to us, with a federal government overriding any of our authority as a province. So where that leads the conversation is going to be fascinating to watch unfold. There will have to be capitulation to any province as it pertains to flowing east-west energy. And yes, I get, look, Quebec is not the boogeyman for me, but things like equalization, which we're challenging in the courts, and the formula that's currently used, which is as old as the Stephen Harper government, it does have to change. I mean, that's where we get some of these thoughts and ideas about separating and the East abusing the West and those types of things, which are becoming very concerning conversations. I do think it's a very loud, vocal minority when we talk about Alberta seceding or separating from the country. But again, those types of conversations, in the face of what the country is facing, is really no more than a distraction. And of course, it's unfortunate when provincial leaders like Ms. Smith is stoking that conversation and pushing it along. Do I think the equalization formula is broken the way it currently stands? Absolutely. Does Quebec unfortunately receive far too much in the form of equalization payments and exemptions afforded to that province and that province alone? 100%. But anyway, what the future holds insofar as economic policy is going to be the key for all our lives to be easier and better. Even though it's not just the federal government that makes my life easier or worse. But anyway, people talk about the need to speed up approvals for natural resource projects. There are a ton of natural resource projects that have already been approved and yet have not been acted on because they haven't been able to raise the money. And whether or not the business model looks like it's what people think it needs to be able to actually borrow. Secondly, interprovincial trade. You know, it gets some conversation, was a really hot topic there for a little while. There are papers. We've had Trevor Tome on this show in the past. In a 2019 report, he was very clear as to the upside of removing the interprovincial trade barriers in full. He wrote that removing the non-geographic trade barriers could dramatically increase cross-Canada trade volumes by as much as 15 percentage points. They could see an additional GDP growth of 3.8% nationally. That's enormous. Just from one policy. It does indeed take some federal leadership to get this done. Will there be exemptions like in this province, jobs related to the electric cord and the like still being protected? I believe so, and I think it absolutely has to be. But that's got to change. Then both parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, and I hate to not talk about the NDP as being a party, and they are, but if we're going to hit our target of 2% of GDP to be spent on defense, it's going to be important and a big economic opportunity here to use the procurement to have Canadian companies build and provide the military equipment required to get us to 2% of GDP. That's not to say that all of a sudden overnight we're going to be able to build submarines, but we've got to be keenly focused there. And now there's an upcoming NATO meeting where it looks quite likely that the benchmark of 2% of GDP may indeed be 3% of GDP within a month, which is a huge increase. So even just this year, hitting 2% requires almost $12 billion in spending on defense every year. So not insignificant to say the very least. And then there's some conversation about what artificial intelligence can mean to the economy. I'm not so sure I completely understand people's perspective on this one. For starters, if it's about building energy projects, because artificial intelligence and the required servers consume copious amounts of power, maybe unfortunate amounts of power. So even in the United States, they're talking about they need another 90 gigawatts of power in the United States for their forecasted use of artificial intelligence. What that means for economic drivers, not really sure, but any ideas that you have on that front, let's get into it today, please. All right, a couple of quick ones. More importantly, back to where we are. questions being raised by the opposition in this case, the Progressive Conservative Party, about where we are regarding all of these stories that certainly garner headlines with shelter in place and targeted shootings, all huge concerns that we all share. Then it's about whether or not we have too many vacancies in law enforcement. All right. So this is from Access to Information that they got at the time, and they're looking for how many shortages are in the RCMP and the RNC. For the RCMP, it's around 50. Which is a big number when you consider the footprint that the RNC or the RCMP have in this province. And for the RNC, short 27 positions. So brings the total shortages to 82. It used to be that being a police officer, how do I say this? So being a police officer decades ago was a highly respected position based on a variety of conversations and a variety of cases that we've seen in this country and in the United States. Law enforcement becomes under siege in some corners. Still highly respected by many, but certainly not the type of conversation that it once was. Good paying job. Of course, can be a dangerous job. There we go. Alan Doyle, give me the thumbs up. But 82 in the form of a shortage is still a pretty big number. We know in the most recent provincial budget there was budgetary monies to hire 10 additional RNC officers, but the sentiment to public safety, even though we haven't seen a big spike in certain types of crimes, violent crime absolutely up, so says Stats Canada. So the progress towards filling all those vacancies is going to be important. In the world of crime, and I read an email from a lady one day, there's months back, talk about romanticizing the criminal, and in this case, the backhoe bandits. You know, basically they're just criminals that use heavy equipment to steal ATMs. So one who's been responsible for at least one conviction and accused in others, Josh Weir, has been given a 2-year prison sentence. Is that the punishment that fits the crime? We're talking huge amounts of money. I do think it's probably a mistake for the media to announce how much money was taken in some of these heists to further wet the whistle of some other potential criminals using heavy equipment. But 2 years, does that suit the type of crime and the destruction brought forward by that type of robbery or whatever? All right, so we talk about things like the dead spots regarding cell phone coverage in the province, and things like whether or not the 5G is one of the culprits, and it absolutely is. I mean, people who can sit in their living room, see the cell phone tower, 2 years ago had certain reliability, and now not so much. So that's part of it. It's not just about convenience and getting what you pay for, because we pay through the nose for our cell phones and our internet and all the data required. It's public safety as well. So anything could happen at any moment in time, and find yourself in a dead spot is a big problem. So there was a pilot project last year, 2 solar-powered, satellite-enabled Wi-Fi hotspots along the Burgeo Highway. Now the province is going out, looking for expressions of interest to add up to 10 new hotspots. It's a good idea, because just imagine what can go wrong as you're traversing the province's highways and byways, and when whatever happens that requires you to need to be able to reach out to someone, whether it be the auto club or the police or your family. If you're in a dead spot, then what? So it's good news that they're trying to accomplish that, and there you go. Also, a deal that's been struck, and it does indeed still beg questions about air service to Labrador. So the province has entered into a new agreement with Provincial Airlines for PAL. Running from June the 15th to September the 20th, 4 days a week, connection between St. John's, Gander and Deer Lake. Working toward, or continuing to explore, as the story says, with Labrador support partners. We've got to figure that out, whether that be in the form of competition. And, you know, we spoke with the late Pat White on this program. He's the man behind Eva's Air. He was saying then that they've got a plan to add that competition and what that might mean for at least stabilizing prices to travel in and out of Labrador. And of course, we know that Pat White has passed. And in other sad news, his wife, just some 5 months later, Florence, has also passed. Condolences to the family and friends. Where does that business model stand? Because, I mean, I would imagine a ton of legwork was done. But the new seasonal service arrangement between the provincial government and PAL, good news. But what does it mean for Labrador? What can be achieved there, period? All right, where are we? So today's the deadline to file your taxes. Everyone's favorite time of year. So if the government owes you a refund, it's not a huge big deal if you don't get it filed by today. But learning from past experience and mistakes made by yours truly. If you don't file by the deadline and you owe the government money, you really got to do it. You've got to file your taxes today. Save yourself a ton of money. Even if you don't have the cash on hand to pay your taxes owing in full to the government, to stave off the immediate 5% penalty, and then another 1% every month thereafter, and the interest that compounds on the monies you owe CRA or owe the federal government. So even if you haven't got the cash, it's really still a very good idea to get your taxes filed today, even though that's a real nuisance. Because it's a cumbersome, overwhelming, unnecessarily complicated tax system, tax code that we have in the country. Oh, and I see that Donald Trump is open to becoming the next pope. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line, follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. And of course, no topic too big, no topic too small. You see developments like the ongoing war in Gaza, the ongoing war in Ukraine, and now the tensions that are ramping up between nuclear powers of India and Pakistan. It's getting pretty dicey on those fronts. So these are big conversations, but we're happy to have them. We're going to talk about whatever's on your mind right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society names multiple Visionaries of the Year annually, but then there's one national Visionary of the Year. Dean Ingram is representing this province, looking to be the Visionary of the Year, and he joins us on line number 1. Good morning, Dean. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
Not too bad at all. How about you?
Good. Well, as a Leaf fan, I live perpetually in hope, and sometimes that hope's been dashed. More often, I'd like to think. But this campaign that I'm involved with now, I'm certainly hopeful that it will actually result in necessary funding for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society to continue their programs. It's a very important initiative, mainly because, and for me, I'm speaking firsthand, that some 20 years ago, I won't elaborate on my history of disease, suffice to say that I had lymphoma, I survived it, and I did that largely result of the community support. And with that in mind, when I was approached to be part of this campaign, in no way, shape, or form could I say no. I'll never live long enough to repay what was done for me, and I'm hoping to give back a little bit of that which was done for me.
Good man. So just walk us through what actually goes on during the Visionary of the Year campaign.
Well, as you mentioned, it's a national campaign where the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society tries to raise funds to support their program so they can continue and even expand. It results in, I guess, for lack of a better word, people flying the banner in their local jurisdiction, and I'm the candidate for Newfoundland. Previous to me, there was Greg Smith, VOCM's own Greg Smith. There was a gentleman from Steel Honda, and I'm the candidate for this year. In the past, the province has been the runner-up. I'm hoping that this year that this province will earn the title of Visionary of the Year for the province as a whole. There's a number of other events. Again, the corporate sponsorship is critically important. The individual donation important. And there's also a number of events that are ongoing. And I had to single out one in particular, that being Montana's on Kenmount Road have generously donated a full catered barbecue for someone who wins a ticket on that to have a backyard barbecue over the course of summer with family and friends.
Yeah, I mean, good for the corporate community to step up because that's what was required. So is the National Visionary of the Year simply about who raises the most money? As fundamental as that?
Well, it's that's what the title comes down to, really. But I guess for me is that I'd almost equate it to going out for a game of bowling or softball or even some other sport with your friends. The Visionary of the Year is given the title, which is all well and good. But the more important thing, the real winners are those that are able to access the program that the society offers. So yes, the winner of the title Visionary of the Year will be the banner who raised the most money on behalf of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and I'm hoping it will be this province. I'm hoping it will be myself.
Yeah, good on you, because I believe the National Visionary of the Year last year raised somewhere around $650,000, if I remember correctly.
It was high, and for me, I'd be very, very happy if I could raise the equivalent of a quarter for each person in this province. That would put us at or near the top in Atlantic Canada. It goes with saying some of the very large corporations in central Canada, they invest hugely in these campaigns. But at the end of the day, whoever the Visionary of the Year is, that's a subtitle. The more important winners are the ones that benefit from the programming. And I'm hoping to do what I can, as I mentioned, to give back a fraction of what was done for me and my family some 20 years ago.
There's also a component to this campaign which is really quite clever, in my opinion, is they have a student visionary category as well. So, when you get them young, that really goes a long, long way for awareness amongst their peers, and, for committing as a volunteer or someone who's trying to give back to the community into the future. So, all these monies raised go straight into leukemia, lymphoma, research, advocacy, and particular supports that are in the community for people who are dealing with the blood cancer, right?
Absolutely. And for me, I've been very clear that any monies raised underneath my banner, I want to focus on three areas. Education, as you mentioned, is critically important. There are many things that people need to know about how healthy lifestyles and that would alleviate the risk of blood cancer and other cancers. It goes with saying research. I live in hope that at some point in time, cancer as a group will get to the point where it becomes a manageable disease, much in the line of diabetes. And that can only happen through research. But the part that's probably nearest and dearest to me is what you mentioned, direct patient support. I got through because of support provided to me and my family. My mother, unfortunately, God rest her soul, did not. And I know the strain firsthand that getting back and forth to appointments, finding a way to get to consultations, medication and other device that might be needed throughout your treatment. The mental health supports, these are all critically important. So I think those three areas that I think are critically important, and those are the three areas that I've asked any monies raised underneath my banner to be focused upon.
Yeah, good on you. Because those community supports sometimes get lost in the shuffle when we talk about raising money for research and advocacy groups and the like. So, Dean, if people would like to contribute to your campaign, where do they have to go? What do they have to do?
Well, the easiest way is you go to visionariesoftheyear.com and you'll see just do a Google search under my name. There's a search bar there. You can find my campaign link directly. On my social media page, though, that I've been running and being shared by a number of others, which I'd like to say thank you very much for that. There are linkages there to support. And as well, as I mentioned, right now there is a raffle ticket being held for that backyard barbecue. They're right now available at Steele Honda on Kenmount Road. Montana's on Kenmount Road, Coastal Outdoors in Claremont, and they will become available at some other venues very shortly. Or for that matter, they can reach out directly to me to arrange for a ticket. And my email, if I can give that now, Tad, if I could.
Fire away.
Yeah, it's D. Ingram, David Ice Nancy, Grover Robert Alpha Mary, 1234 at outlook.com. And Patty, once again, thank you so much for having me on, and I'll take the opportunity to say thank you, VOCM, for all the support that's been shown to date for this campaign.
Happy to have you on the show. Good luck, Dean. Stay in touch.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, there you go. So if you can support, please do exactly that. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about tenders for road work and then whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Clyde, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Patty, from beautiful Rock Harbor here on Beyond Peninsula.
Good morning.
I was just phoning in about the road work has been announced so far, and as far as I can understand, there's nothing put out there for the contractors to bid on yet, right? So I don't know where this is going, because here we are now, it's in May. This is the time of the year now to get at it, right? We got the longer evenings and longer mornings, so you can get a lot more work done this time of the year. You understand what I'm saying there? Because I think once you get up to August again, you start losing in the evenings, and usually with construction, as you're working on the roads, you're working 12 and 13 hours. That's what I'm a flagger now. Happened at that a few years there with the contractors and that, so it'd be nice to get the work out there and get a bid on and get it started, right?
The tenders, plenty of tenders have gone out.
No, I heard that they're not.
Well, I got a list of them.
Oh, have you?
Yep.
Well, then some of the contractors I was talking to, no names, but as far as I know, they haven't had anything to bid on yet, so I don't know where the tender's out to.
I'm not sure who's seen what, but I mean, it was early in April where they made that big announcement about 316 million, I think was the number, for road work, maintenance work for 25-26 and into 26-27. There was just a very short list for the 26-27, but for 25-26, there was a big list of road work that was released.
Yeah, we've been calling in about this by Rock Harbor Station I've been at that for years, but I don't see anything there for us, not this year anyway. But even if there's nothing there to do that, like I say, we got a safety issue with the roads. You got to drive very slow over it. So if we has an emergency, somebody takes minutes. If you get sick and the ambulance can't get out here, so I think it's time for them to at least do some of the bad spots and make it safer than what it is. You should be with all the potholes everywhere. We're all complaining all over the island. There should be just this part of it for going around. Just at least do the real bad spots, put in a few pipes and do it up a bit. You know what I mean? Ditching, whatever. I know they got their hands full because they're gone so far back. It keeps getting worse every time it rains. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I don't have the full list in front of me, so I don't know if it has attention to your area. But there was, I'm going to guess, 40 or 50 projects, which included bridges and maintenance on roads and replacing certain sections of asphalt. Yeah, it was a long list. I'll try to find it during the break. But
yes, I did look at that, Paddy, when I come out there. Where it's going to be and all this. So I'm just saying, more or less. There's nothing started yet. So with the new things they put out, as far as I can see, and like I say, we only get a small window in the summertime, and try to get it done. You know what I mean? So the more the better. Like I say, just making sure that they know that it's time to get at it and get a bit of work done, right?
Absolutely, and which was a good idea years ago when finally the government decided to release the tenders for road work much earlier than in years past, because the companies themselves needed opportunity to plan and to ramp up to take on some of the contracts that they're bidding on and will be successful in getting. And then, of course, we have a pretty short season here, as you rightfully point out. So the 5-year road work plan was a good idea. The early tenders is a good idea. Is it working as it's intended? I'm not 100% sure, but I will try to find a list of the road work that was planned with that announcement. And I think that was it was in the first week of April anyway when they made that announcement. I'll see if I can find it.
So I guess, Paddy, there we're talking about the motor's gone already, you know what I mean?
The what?
So therefore, some of this should be almost started, especially when it comes to ditching and stuff like that they got to do. That first, you got to prep it all up anyway and get it all ready before you even put down the pavement. So, that work can be done earlier, right? And that way you'll be ahead a bit. So hopefully somebody will get on the ball and we'll get a bit of work done anyway. And that's my 2 cents worth for today anyway.
And I appreciate your time. Thanks for the call, Claude.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Be safe.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep rolling here. It's about 25 years ago that there was a study conducted up in Lab West regarding the effects on people's health with the silica dust coming from the iron ore mines. So I don't know where it stands today, but I guess we'll find out when we say good morning to the NDP member for Lab West. Joining us on line number 1, that's Jordan Brown. Jordan, you're on the air.
Thanks for having me on, Paddy. Yeah, there's been 2 studies, one in the 2000s, and then there was another follow-up study that was released in 2015. And then the 2015 study recommended that there be a review done after 10 years, and now we're on the 10-year mark, and the province has no interest in continuing on that dust study work.
Here's a question. So, did we learn anything different between the 2000 study and the 2015 study? Because the the impact on your health regarding that silica dust, I don't imagine changes over time. So, did anything change insofar as our understanding of the impacts?
It's not the impacts of the dust; it's the quantity and amount of dust that's being generated.
That. Okay.
Yeah, you look at Takora has been working, back up and running. You look at IOC, who's actually increased production over the years and have moved out into other areas of mining. And you look at this the changing in winds, and climate change has an effect on how the dust moves throughout the region. These things have actually changed significantly over the years, and people are worried. Well, does this change the silica dust values? Does it change in the community? The previous study focused more on the mine site than the town site, and now a lot of people in the town site want to know what's happening in their health as well. A lot of people that don't work in the mine are still affected by the mine. So this is where we've been asking, for the last couple of years, asking government to, do another part of the dust study, focus on the community, and try to find out, what can we do to mitigation? How is it affecting the health of the region? These are a lot of things, questions that a lot of the people want answered. And USW 5795 has been pushing as well, the department, to make the study on the go.
This is a very real issue. I mean, if folks who don't live in that area don't realize how bad it is, do yourself a favor and have a quick Google, because you'll come up with images that are crystal clear is a good choice of words. I mean, you could taste the dust, I've heard reported, and there's pictures of a distinct haze over the entire region with the dust. There's apartment buildings that have been absolutely almost impossible to see because of the dust. So this is a bigger problem than people realize unless you've been in the region or live in the region.
Absolutely, and you look at how the winds have changed and shifted. You look at how things move through, dust moves up through the region. But then you also have to look at the people that actually work in it as well, which is another core part of it. Is how has that changed over the years as well, and how does it affect their health? I just did. The National Day of Mourning for workers who lost their lives on the job site, and also injured and diseases caused by the job site. And a majority, I sat there and I laid a wreath for a longtime family friend. I grew up with his son. He died of industrial lung disease because of the dust and working in the mine site. And I laid a wreath for him this past Monday. And you look at through the list and you see all the names that come up here in Labrador West. People who have died of silicosis, asbestosis, industrial lung disease. This is a serious, serious thing. And to ask for, the review of the study, which was recommended that it was done after 10 years. We'll look at it all again. And, the government is just sitting there going, no, we're not going to do this. So this is, a pretty slap in the face to the people that actually, who keeps the GDP of this province pretty high. So this is the people that actually put their life on the line, their health on the line, to export iron ore, which is the province's largest export. So this is pretty significant that this is not being done.
Regardless of economic contribution, it has a distinct impact on your health, which should be enough for government to act. So what has dust control measures looked like in the past? Is it water or is it lime, or what are we doing?
It's a combination of all kinds of different things. They look at different types of ventilation in the mine site. Masking is a big part of the job. But there are majority of the places out there you have to wear full face or half face masks. There's water. There's lime. There's the thing called tackifier that they put down on things like that. But that's in certain medications. But it's what do we look at how you affects the health of the community as well, because you can't control everything that comes off the mine site to the best ability, because there is shifting winds, there's climate change. These all affect how the dust moves about the region. And this is what we need to find out the data on. What is the best way to make sure that, we're keeping dust low, we're making sure people's health isn't the best thing, but also to know what is actually going on within the community when it comes to this issue.
I know that there was some talk or thoughts that maybe imposing sets of fines on the companies themselves to try to do more to protect the community from the silica dust. But I think the government said fines are not the answer. But what's the role of the companies or the corporations here? What are they currently doing? What should they be doing?
Well, right now they do have, their own internal dust plans, but they do have a social responsibility to try to keep as much dust down out of the community as much as possible. The community isn't the mine site. The community is supposed to be, and quote unquote, like a safe space out of it. We're supposed to be able to, people who don't work in the mine should not be subjected to mining industrial diseases. So this is where, they have a social responsibility to make sure that what happens on the mine site is contained as much as possible onto the mine site, and to make sure that the community actually is free of dust as much as possible. You look at, they're doing seeding, they're doing water, they're doing these kinds of things. But, this is where companies had a little bit of more of an oversight on actual dust control from mine sites. And we're here in Lab West, mining is actually starting to pick up in other regions of this province as well. You look at what's going on around, the Bay Verte Peninsula area, Valentine Lake, all these places. These are mine sites that are also starting to pick up as well. And these things that are happening here are happening on a smaller scale in these other regions too. So the province itself needs to actually have a better dust control plan for entirety of the mining region and mining industry across the entire province, because it's just not here. We are the largest mines in the entire province, yes, but we're not the only mines in the entire province, and we're not the only open pit mines in the entire province.
No, that's for sure. Jordan, appreciate the time. Anything else this morning?
Just one more thing. The release yesterday from the province on, PAL getting, some boost there for interconnectivity. And
yes.
We quickly noticed that how Labrador was completely left out once again. It's great that the province has seen the thing, but it's pretty sad that after, $15 million, they still can't come to any arrangement or anything to actually help the people of Labrador. And I understand this is for tourism, but at the same time, Labradorians have to travel the most. We don't have the same amount of access to services as the rest of the province. I always say, every single Labradorian's been to St. John's, but not every county's been to Labrador. So, this is because we don't have the services like they have centralized on the island. So once again, it just goes to show that this province is thinking with an island-centric mindset and completely leaving out Labradorians who, have no other choice but to travel for reasons outside of, joy. We're traveling for medical, we're traveling for services, we're traveling for education. And once again, this province completely forgot about us and left us hanging once again after another budget. And it's absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, it was right on top of my mind when I was speaking with you to talk about that, because I brought it up off the top of the show. And where the answer lies, I would imagine it's multifaceted, whether it be about airport fees, landing fees, and other federal fees, and competition, and the fact that there is some subsidy money, we'll call it, going to PAL on a variety of fronts. So where the actual solution lies, I don't know, but to travel, to have it so cost prohibitive for so many people, for so many reasons, is just an awful state of affairs when we're talking about modern day Canada in 2025. It's never going to be perfect. The more rural, isolated parts of the country will always have concerns related to travel, and there's not a silver bullet. But when people do the cost comparisons, even if you just look at the increase over the last 5 years, what it looks like in Labrador compared to the rest of the country and other more rural, isolated parts of Canada, it's out of control in Labrador. I'll say that. Jordan, I really appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks for having me on. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
You too, pal. Bye-bye. Jordan Brown, NDP member for Lab West. Let's take a break. Do not go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Terry, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing okay, thanks. How you doing?
Good. Patty, I called this morning to make a public complaint against the CBC, and, I'll tell you why. So the other day, actually a few weeks ago, a friend of mine, he sent me a video of Mark Critch doing a rant about Pierre Poilievre on his 22-minute show. It was a pretty scathing rebuke of the Conservative leader and linked him to Donald Trump, and it sounded like it was cut right from the Liberal Party playbook, right? Okay. So I went and looked for the other videos on YouTube that showed from the show that they did on other federal leaders, and I found multiple Poilievre videos that were meant to be funny, but they seemed more like political hit jobs than anything. Then I found the videos of the Liberal leaders. And let me tell you what a stark difference. So Mark Critch did an interview with Justin Trudeau late last year, and one with Mark Carney a little more recently. And it looked like Mark Critch was on a first date with both of them, trying to woo and impress them. Like there were the conversation, light little jabs, nothing too harsh, and it was ultimately a positive portrayal of both of them. So, and the CBC in particular have been, well, in my opinion, and probably I believe the opinion of many other people, sliding further and further to the left of the political spectrum. It's simply tolerated. Like, I'm a small C Conservative. I've supported the federal Conservatives for the last 15 years or so. But before that, I supported the Cretch and Martin Liberals. So on the rare occasion when I watch the CBC, I just expect that my views as a Conservative will be misrepresented or made fun of, because that's just how they operate. But because more people, listen to VOCM Open Line than watch the CBC, I never really cared too much about it. But after the election the other night, I decided to voice my concerns, because the CBC is a state-funded broadcaster. It pretends to be an icon of Canadiana, supposed to represent the interests of all Canadians, but it seems to represent only one political ideology. It ignores, and I would argue ridicules, half the country regularly. It likes to cast aspersions of ignorance and bigotry against anyone who's not on the left of politics. This is why I supported the defunding of the CBC, and I still do. At least the national portion of it. I think CBC Radio does a pretty good job. I think the local news, like Here and Now, I like their programming if it's all local. But on the national level, I think it's just a massive cash hog that has little viewers, and it does more to divide the nation than bring it together. That's my rant now against the CBC.
Okay. I'm not a defender or a proponent or an attack dog against other media outlets, because it's not really what I should be doing, to be honest. CBC's lost its way, though. That much I'll say. They need a careful review of their mandate. Now, insofar as Mark Critch or 22 Minutes, I mean, a satirical comedy show, people can take that for whatever grain of salt they choose to attach to things like Saturday Night Live or 22 Minutes or other comedy-based shows, sketch or otherwise. So I'll put that out there. Insofar as the news coverage, I do think there's an exaggeration about how left the CBC is. I mean, if I look at CBC today or during the Trudeau time in the Prime Minister's office, there was always coverage of everything that went on inside the government, whether it be with SNC Lavalin or with the We charity or Jane Philpott or Jody Wilson-Raybould. So, I mean, they do cover it. I get where people think there's a slant, but we've come to a place where, I know this is not about you, Terry, because I don't know you, is so many people are only comfortable when they hear, read, or see what they agree with. So, you know, to defund the CBC, I think it's just a bad idea. I mean, does it need to have a review of its mandate? I would suggest yes. Does it look good on the CBC when they're laying off hundreds of workers and they're giving massive bonus to the executive? It's a terrible look, and it should never be allowed, period. If it's especially when it's getting federal funding. But, I mean, the biggest media outlets in this country are not left-leaning. They are not. I mean, we can look at the ownership, especially in the newspaper world. The Post Media Group is the furthest thing from left. I mean, it is absolutely right-wing news and coverage and commentary endlessly. So 22 Minutes and its influence on politics, I don't know. I don't know what the ratings are these days, but I do watch satirical comedy shows and take it as that, as opposed to that being the stance of the broadcaster. And it's not even a CBC product. They broadcast on CBC, but that's a privately owned company that produces that particular show.
It is, but my issue is that it's still state funded, so they're still getting monies from the taxpayer, and you know, I agree with you that when you look at other satirical shows such as Saturday Night Live and whatnot, you can. I think Saturday Night Live during the last 5-10 years also lost its way in how skewed it went to one side, but that's here nor there. But the CBC is state funded. If I would, any of your listeners, yourself included, to just have a quick scan of what's on YouTube, and you can yourself then the level of bias, partisan bias, I would have to argue, that when you look at how they interviewed and then the continuous hit pieces against Poilievre. Now, obviously, as a conservative, I'm looking at going, this is insane. Why am I paying for this? It's going to be a state-funded broadcaster. Then they need to do a better job of at least hiding their biases. We all have our biases. We all, support different things. But I don't agree with the amount of money that they're taking, which is over $1 billion a year. And I think that money could be spent better ways that will half the country.
Yeah, I mean, let me put this to you, just see what you think of this. You know, insofar as how they handled Mr. Poilievre, whether it be in sketches or how they handled other liberal politicians and or liberal issues, when Mr. Poilievre, one of the key planks in his campaign, there was lots of issues that he spoke to, of course, it's a federal campaign, but defunding the CBC probably didn't do him any favors in satirical comedy shows based on the CBC.
Doesn't matter. You're still state funded. If this is a private company doing what they wanted to do with private money. Have at it or do what you want to do. But as a state-funded media, you still need to stay as down the middle as you possibly can, regardless of what the political policies of the people that you're targeting are.
Do you think it would be part of the conversation as well to know that Mr. Poilievre refuses to go on the show?
Maybe that's a catch-22. Why would you go on a show where you've been absolutely lambasted? And not in the... I mean, again, when I look at this, I'm like, these are just hit pieces. I mean, they're casting aspersions of bigotry and racism where I don't think there are any.
Certainly there are. I mean, as much as we all have our own built-in biases that, I try to protect mine for the integrity of the show, but... to say that there's not examples, clear and present examples of bigotry and racism in all parties, and certainly for the party you support, we can't deny that there is some, because there is.
Absolutely, of course, but that's human nature. Now, you're going to find bigotry across the spectrum. But when you look at let me put it this way. You never hear those aspersions against you never hear them against the NDP. You never hear them against the Liberal Party. You always hear them against the Conservatives. Has there been a history where some things have been said? Maybe decades ago. But, I mean, if you look at Poilievre himself, I mean, his wife is a person of color. The idea that his children are mixed race, I believe is from Venezuela. So the idea that you're just going to go, this man, because he is a conservative, is a racist, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. And the fact that it's coming from my taxpayer dollars, as a Canadian, I don't support it.
And when we talk about defunding, the CBC, if we're looking across the world at public broadcasters, it's one of the lowest funded public broadcasters in the world. And we talk about defunding it, and people can have their own opinion on it. They're happy to share it on the show, or they're welcome to share it on the show. We're talking about like $33 a person annually for the CBC. And I don't think Mr. Poilievre did himself any favours on this front either. He talked about defunding the English portion of the CBC, and to what extent we didn't really know. But then, of course, to not remove any funding from Radio Canada and the Francophone services at CBC, while at the exact same time saying it needs to be a stand on its own 2 feet business model. But he didn't assign that thought to the Francophone portion of the CBC, which is simply a pander for Quebec votes. So it's the message was weird as far as I'm concerned, and like I've already admitted, I think the CBC mandate has to be carefully reviewed. They have lost their way. I'm not talking about bias. I'm talking about how they structure the business, how the business operates. And again, they're a competitor of mine, right? We compete for the same type of stuff, whether it be eyeballs or ears and advertising dollars. So there you go. Terry, very quickly, final word to you because I'm late for the newscast.
Listen, I think you guys do a great job, and I don't think you guys are biased, so keep up the good work.
I appreciate your time. Stay in touch.
Bye-bye.
There you go. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Well, there's going to be lots of discussion in the country continuing into the future regarding the energy industry, including the oil business. The rumbles on the street regarding Beta North continue to rumble. Join us on the program. We've invited him on to see what he knows. That's our friend, Rob Strong. Good morning, Rob. You're on the air.
Rumble, rumble, rumble. You're entirely correct, Patty. I don't know where your sources are, but you're exactly correct. I guess the current rumble, as you suggest, is as a result of some open houses that Equinor had here in St. John's yesterday. They had two yesterday, two 2.5-hour sessions, and they have two more scheduled for the 14th of May. And I got to tell you, I mean, I've been around this industry a long time, and it's hard to find someone as open as they can be as Equinor. For instance, yesterday we had probably 40 or 50 of the local business community. We had some presentations by Tora Losef, who's the country manager, and the project manager. And then we had probably 7 or 8 of his senior officials, the drilling manager, the subsea manager, the FPSO manager. And they sat amongst the audience and were available for one-on-ones. So how refreshing is that? I'm not going to make any friends at Exxon or Suncor or Cenovus, but boy, these other companies can learn a lot from the way that Equinor communicates and tells us what they can, and of course there's certain things what they can't tell us. But what they told us yesterday is potential, and I keep going back to the FID, the financial investment decision, and until that decision is made, because this is probably a $10 billion plus project, so pretty significant when they make the final investment decision, and that has not been made yet. But having said that, they've certainly progressed the project. For instance, they're now talking about first oil either 2030 or 2031. And in the context of, there are no wells being drilled or very few wells being drilled, that's optimistic. That's almost fast-tracked in our business. But so that was encouraging that they've actually suggested a target date of 2030, 2031. And remember, all these wells have got to be drilled. And they've also told us yesterday that the ownership of the FPSO, the floating production storage off-taking vessel, will not be Equinor, but will be a third party. And that's quite common. I spent, as you know, as some of your listeners may know, I spent some time in Guyana, and of the 6 FPSOs down there, Exxon is the operator. Exxon's the oil company, but they don't own any of them. They do not own any of them. So it's pretty common industry practice these days for oil companies to contract out the building and the ownership and the operation of their FPSOs. So that was a bit of news we got. Anybody who's followed this project over the years realizes, or should realize, that Bay du Nord is 5 separate fields. I used to be able to name them all, but what they've decided now, and again they offered this out to us to inform us, is to start with a 2-field development, 2 parts of the field. Cappahayden and Bacalhau are two of the 5 fields. So they're going to start there and develop them, and then as they begin to generate some experience, some expertise, and some cash flow, then they'll look at subsea tiebacks for the other 3. So that's encouraging. What also is encouraging is that Tora Loseth, who as I say is the country manager for Equinor, was quite vocal in saying they think there's a lot more oil out in the Flemish Pass. So it's and you need that when you're 500 kilometers out in the middle of the North Atlantic, when you're in 1,000 to 1,500 meters of water, when you have no surrounding infrastructure. So you need a lot. So hopefully the Bay du Nord field, subject to, of course, governments, and we do know that the feds have really approved Bay du Nord, subject to approval, it could stimulate some extra activity out there and keep the industry alive for years to come. So that was interesting. What else did I tried to write down as much as I could here. They are talking about a series of supplier development seminars this fall, which is encouraging because for companies like my own and others, you want to get ready for this thing. And although we've been talking about it for years, until you know the final, you're getting near to a final decision gate, and that's the buzzword they use, the decision gate. Until you hear the final decision gate, you're really not committing resources. Psychologically, you're getting ready, you're planning, but you're not buying new equipment or you're not doing advanced training. So we're hopefully, as a result of these supplier development seminars scheduled for the end of this year, we can start that actual movement, because it takes time to acquire new equipment, new expertise, and so on. Got any questions?
I do.
Sure you do.
You rightfully corrected me a couple of times when I was using $35 a barrel, because that was initially what Equinor was talking about regarding break-even at Bay du Nord. In their openness this go-round, did they happen to mention that kind of number? Because I think for public understanding of where we are with that particular field, that would be an interesting number to have.
No, they haven't, and it's interesting because if you look at, I looked at Brent crude this morning at $64 a barrel, which is, a bit frightening if you're an oil company. But they have not mentioned. What they did mention yesterday is they're looking at an FPSO scenario to produce about 150 to 175,000 barrels of oil a day. So it's a fairly substantial structure and very optimistic production, but they have not. They have not come out and said that X number of dollars per barrel. So we'll just have to, and again, that's an internal decision, and that's an internal decision by Equinor. And remember, BP has 40% of the Bay du Nord field. So, but no one's ever told me what it is. Equinor talks about, and this is typical in the industry, Equinor talks about in excess of 500 million barrels in these 2 fields in Cappahayden and Bacalhau. The CNLOPB is carrying 1 billion barrels or so, and there are others in the business community who suggest a lot more, but we really don't know what the final reserves or resource will be. I remind listeners that many years ago when Hibernia was announced, we were told that, and I was there, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was there when ExxonMobil in those days which is subsequently taken over by Exxon or merged with Exxon. Mobil stood up in front of us and said there are 654 million barrels recoverable in the Hibernia field. And of course, the industry celebrated 2 years ago about 1.4 billion recoverable already, and another probably 400 or 500 million barrels. So, what you estimate at the beginning is probably not what you end up with for a variety of reasons. The oil companies, being publicly traded, have to be very careful, have to be very conservative. But secondly, technology has improved. Mm-hmm. When Hibernia started, the industry was drilling wells straight down. Nowadays, they're drilling horizontal, and I've never seen a bent piece of pipe. I don't know how they go down a couple thousand meters, and then go horizontal. But that's an example of the technology and the changes. So it's hard to quantify, or it's hard to say that this field will produce 500 million barrels, or this field will produce a billion barrels of oil, because, as I say, the subsea tiebacks, for instance, which is the buzzword these days, when you have an existing structure, like Hibernia is a good example. Hibernia is an existing structure, as everybody knows, a big concrete structure, and all the wells up to a couple of years ago were drilled from the Hibernia platform. But then they decided to develop a smaller field of 200 million barrels, 10 kilometers away. So that's an example of a subsea tieback. So there are a number of factors that go into trying to say how many barrels of oil are recoverable in that field. So it's changing technology for sure.
Yeah, I mean, accountability to the shareholders regarding lowball or conservative estimates is just required. Like, they have a fiduciary responsibility on that front. If you exaggerate the recoverables, and then all of a sudden you can't live up to the expectation of the shareholder, because shareholders buy on spec. So there's obvious reasons why. Very quickly, whether it be the provincial Liberals here, back in 2015, talking about doubling oil production, and Mr. Poilievre on the campaign trail talked about doubling oil production in this province. Number one, politicians can't force feed doubling production. And secondly, when I speak to people I know in the business, they say, look, that's sort of cockeyed optimism. That's, politically aspirational, but not realistic. And just even the amount of infrastructure required, let alone the amount of drilling and actual production and decision-making gates into decades down the road, it always sounded like a pretty flimsy argument to me. How about you?
Well, I agree with you on the political side of it. Politicians don't always know what they're talking about and want to paint a picture. But if you look at some of the figures that Oilco, that Jim Keating and his team have down there, there's a lot of oil out there. The question is, there are two questions: is it economical to produce because of the technology, because of the deep water, because of the ice, because of the proximity to land? And secondly, what about oil pricing? So I think the oil is out there. Whether or not it's economical to produce, and that's not up for government to decide. Government should stick their nose out of the business as best they can. Classic example of that was in the Liberal government of Mr. Trudeau, and in particular his Minister of Natural Resources, Jonathan Wilkinson, who said, quote, "There's no business case for LNG on the east coast of Canada." Well, that's not the government's decision. That's a company's decision. Government are not in the business of producing oil. So when politicians stick their nose in areas where they shouldn't, it doesn't do us any good at all, because they don't know what they're talking about. How is that?
Fair. And LNG across the country, there are a long list of LNG projects that have already been greenlit by the government. Important to note, because we talk about unleashing all kinds of things, but unleashing things requires a business model that shows profit down the line. If the LNG projects that have already been approved were profitable at this moment in time, they'd be capitalized. They'd be progressing, but they're not. There's a reason for that. Rob, really appreciate the time as usual. Thanks for doing it.
My pleasure, Patty. Anytime.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All
right, let's get to the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Nikki, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you. How about you?
I'm good. I was just listening earlier, and I heard about the fella calling in about the mine and how the dust and everything like that and is affecting their health.
I would imagine it is.
Yes, no, and I'm from a mining community myself, and I know how years down the road it can actually really affect you, right?
Okay, so what can you tell us about it?
Okay, so anyways, where I'm from, there is a mine, and they even, the radon gas kits.
Yep.
That they're promoting people to have in their houses because, just a test for it, Patty?
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, and the mining companies where I'm from are promoting the homeowners not to get it because their house value goes down. So if you test for that, you find it goes down. Sorry, I'm a first-time caller. I listen to you all the time.
I'm glad you do listen. I'm glad you called. Now, for me, testing for radon, because it is colorless, odorless, tasteless, and it can be extremely damaging to your health. It's the number one risk if you're a smoker. The chances of lung cancer with radon in the home is huge.
All of that. It is. And Patty, a lot of people don't realize you're breathing that in. It's in your water, is in your land, is everywhere. Because where I'm from, there's an open pit mine now. I'm from St. Lawrence, actually. And it used to be underground years ago. And my dad was actually a miner. And they died, many young men, really young. So now with the open pit mine, and I won't say too much, but there's tests going on. They can test that right up Lamoline, right from St. Lawrence, right to Epworth to Marystown. So they're blasting that. Do you not think that's going in the atmosphere? It definitely is, right? What do you think, Patty?
Sure. But the silica dust, though, for 1 second, the examples out there in the studies done about the impact on health, and it's not just lung cancer or COPD.
No, it's a lot more.
Also attached to things like kidney disease. There's been reports and studies done into what it means for autoimmune disorders, bronchitis.
You're right.
So it's a serious issue.
Yeah, and anyways, and I think that, it should be, really recognized because it is an issue, and especially if we want to get all these mines on the go in Newfoundland and in Labrador, shouldn't we protect our communities with the mine? That's all I'm saying.
I think you're right, and I don't think there's an argument against it. For the government, when we talk about things like the health accord and, the year of sport and try to be physically active and watching our diet and all those things, if there are things that are just, outside of our control as residents, in this case in Lab West, then the onus is on government. It's incumbent on government to acknowledge it, to understand it, and do whatever they can about it, whether it be suppression methods, whether it be making the companies do a better job, whatever it takes, because people's health, they have no choice but to live around it. So I hear people from Lab West send me notes saying, when I lived up there or I worked up there, I'd wake up in the morning with my nose and my mouth full of this dust.
It broke my heart this morning because my dad was a miner and he died young because of that. And I was sweeping the floor, listening to your show. I loved your show, by the way. And then I was like, oh my God, is this happening in this day and age? Because where's your PPE? Where's your protective equipment? Where is all that? But how can the communities be protected? That's what I'm wondering.
That's an excellent question, but I guess it starts with the commitment that every 10 years we update the study. So what would it be, the kind of dust, where it is, the different, now that mining has been increased levels of activity since the last report was done in 2015, the government really does need to do this. And when we understand it, then we can come up with a plan to do something about it.
Oh, I know. I'm happy to talk with you, but and be all the same. It used to be, I'm from St. Lawrence, so the mine used to be underground. They used to come up out of there, Patty, black. It was that bad. They didn't know. They were just working. They didn't know. They were just doing their job. And now it's on the go, and they're blasting it. And same thing, same story. But what can be done about it? That's what I'm wondering.
That's the question. I appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for doing it as a first-timer. Nikki, stay in touch.
Yes, you too, Patty. Keep doing the best job.
Appreciate that.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oops, that was a little bit quick. Let's see if we can get a break pretty much on time. When we come back, Mark's there to talk about the Liberals. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Mark, you're on the air.
Thanks, Patty. I think you have a pretty good perspective of the political scene here. I think it's pretty spot on, is what I mean, with what you're saying about how Paul Nouve came out and said that, maybe he'd keep the French votes, right? Like, he's playing up to the Quebec people and everything. But what I call talk about was the Liberals. Now, did you see him dancing after he won?
I did, yeah.
I thought that was great. I think Canadians, we'll just say Canadians, I think Canadians like him. He got a little flair, a little sense of humor, and I think that's good in hard times. Then, sometimes the things he said. Did you see his speech? When he won, the 20-minute speech he gave us?
I was at that point pretty tired. I kind of paid attention to it, but I was pretty cooked at that point.
I would recommend for any political junkies out there to go back and just watch that his 2025, because it was a little long-winded, but he still made some nice points, right? So I like the guy. He's a little bit funny, but sometimes he's a little bit long-winded, and the speeches are a little bit boring. But he says a lot of the right things, right?
Well, he's got a tall task ahead of him. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. Whether it be all strictly domestic issues, whether it be about international relations, because there's so much going on that is sometimes even hard to keep straight. I mean, the dancing business, I think, is really indicative of just exactly how silly politics has become. Like, I've got people sending me pictures of that and videos of that saying that's so cringeworthy. How could someone vote? He was dancing at a victory, a victory event. I just don't know what the problem is.
He really
so danced.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
I really am, but he. You can see how it would be called cringeworthy sometimes, but I mean, he did let loose, right? And I think Canadians in their heart know it's okay, right?
Well, for me, I couldn't care less. If he danced or if he did...
he really jammed out. You should see it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if he did the twist or he did the tango with his wife, or if he did the little
he came out rocking in that hockey jersey, whatever it was.
Custom made,
he really gave a good dance. He was singing and everything, right? I mean, the guy's kind of funny, right? He's kind of likable.
Sure. I mean, he's also, when you talk about someone who's been a central banker and, at the very top of the corporate community, it's kind of, they're not very approachable for the vast majority of us because we're not that. Right. We're not central bankers. We haven't been the CEO or the chair of a board of directors of a $900 billion private equity company, but we'll see what he's got ahead of him. And it's, as we all know, regardless of the politician and or the party, campaigning can be very arduous and time-consuming and tiring. But when compared to governing, campaigning is the easy part. Now comes the hard part.
Well, I guess. I'm not sure. I haven't been there, right? I haven't governed. So, but I'm sure you're probably right. You have a little bit more experience than me, I think, with the whole political news, But I just want to call and give my 2 cents. If anyone, hasn't seen... The speech was good too, right? They should check out the speech. And Paul Nouve was an interesting subject as well. I mean, what really, and getting back to the Liberals story, when Justin Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago, right? He said after he did the wrong thing, right? He said the wrong thing to Trump, and by Trump said there 2 weeks ago, he said that Justin is the one that said Canada would cease to exist without him. Now, Justin Trudeau probably was just saying that as kind of a joke, right?
Well,
but then Trump went on about Canada, might not exist if it wasn't for the States. But that's all in Trump's head, right? It's unfortunate for Trudeau, but in the end, it all came out to pasture, right? So it worked out for the Liberals.
They certainly seized on the opportunity. That's patently obvious. And I don't believe for a second that the Prime Minister at the time said, "We are doomed. We will cease to exist without you." I mean,
well,
nobody.
apparently that's what Trump said, right? Last week, he said when he said that to Trudeau, that's what Trudeau was saying.
Yeah, he says lots of things.
I don't know if you've seen it. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. But he got carried away, right? And it really made Trudeau look bad, I think. No, I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, certainly the impact that the president had on the federal election campaign is real, and it's undeniable, and it's also obviously very important. I'm not so sure why any segment of society would not think that it is a serious issue, because it is a serious issue. Our largest trading partner, we're talking about millions of jobs directly related to trade with the United States, and even just yesterday, more chaos and confusion about a couple of executive orders about tariffs on the auto sector. You know, people continue to say that, you know, cars or vehicles that are made in Canada or made in the States or made in Mexico, by the time you procure rubber to the time that you put the last finishing touches on an automobile, it has been over and back to borders several times. There's no such thing as a vehicle that's made in full in one country or the other. It's just not a thing. And these tariffs are having an impact on price already in the United States. And we still haven't seen the full economic impact. And talking about, you know, he says things, you know, we talk about trade deficits, which are not subsidies. They buy things we have, and they buy things that they like from us.
Right.
And, I mean, at one point, it was $100 billion, and it was $200 billion, and it's $250 billion. So taking him with a grain of salt is the only way that I can approach him to, you know, protect my mental sanity.
It was a trade deficit, everybody going on like it was, he's funding us, right?
He's not.
Too much. I mean, 1 year from the next, whatever, who got the up on the trade deficit is, you know, we all know what that means if we go to Economics 101, right?
Yeah, because I don't have a trade deficit with Sobeys. Right? I buy something that I need or want from them, so that doesn't mean that I have some sort of subsidy issue. They buy stuff from us. If you backed energy out, there's no such thing as a trade deficit.
Publicly in front of them.
Yeah,
no, that's right. It's not like that, right? And he's Trump's too funny, and that's what he is an entertainer, right? And that's what I started liking Trump again. I really did. Because my support went back to the left, and now he started coming back last year, and I started liking the guy again, and I realized it was because he's an entertainer, and I'm really starting to enjoy this guy because the late night shows on the left, you know, Jimmy Kimmel, they make so much fun of Trump, and it started to humanize him in a way such that I'm starting to like Trump, right? Because it's kind of like, well, okay, he's human, right?
Yeah, I can't do it.
So
I can't
you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, fair enough. He's got lots of support. I mean, some 80 million people.
You get what I'm saying, right? Sometimes these guys, sure, they're a bit entertaining, right? And that's it, right? So I'm going to, I'll leave it at the last point, I guess, of course. And then there was a small news tidbit come out where Paul Newt was like, no, I'm not going to, do anything with Trump. And then the next day, Trump comes out and he says, "Oh, Paul, he's no friend of mine. I don't know him." It's like they pick up on one headline and then they reacted to each other. Oh, and it just killed Paul Newt, right? It just tanked him.
It wasn't helpful to his campaign, that's for sure. Mark, I appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you for the history.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
All the best. Bye-bye. All right, break time. When we come back, Zachary's in the queue to talk about the election as well. And just that friendly reminder, we didn't talk every call on the election. If you want to spread it around, bring up new topics, elaborate on things you've heard in the past, let's do it. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Dave's just reorganizing our call on line one. It dropped, and sometimes we don't know whether or not that's you left and or something got cut off, but let's rejoin Zachary on line one. Zachary, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How's it going?
Doing well, thanks. How about you?
Good. My apologies about the columns out here in Holyrood, and the cell reception is not too good.
Totally get it.
Just calling in this morning. I got kind of inspired by the previous caller there. No shade to him, but I'm just wondering, like, how you're feeling or what your take on it is, because over the last 10 years, like, I don't feel good voting for the Liberals again over the last 10 years, and it seems that a lot of people were happy, and the distraction. And I'm just wondering, like, do people really think that we're going to get something different this time around, or are they just happy to see a new face in it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure where to start there. I just want to pick up on one word you used because the connection is not great. You said the word distraction. Was that the Trump impact that you were referring to?
No, I was just kind of like more so it's the distraction. It's pretty like we had to. Trudeau was becoming very untenable as a leader, bringing a new face. He's a little bit more personable, maybe a little bit more likable, and it seems that was enough to kind of distract people from the policy issues and the things that people have been noticing over the last people. Not that I'm like for liberals necessarily, but do people really think that they're like is a change in the next few years? They just have to. They really believe these promises? I don't know.
Yeah, well, political promises are flimsy at the very best of times, regardless of who's offering them. But here's just some of the basics, I think. For a lot of Conservative supporters and even fence-sitters, the biggest problem with the Liberals, for many people, and that's what I hear anyway, was Justin Trudeau. So when he went a lot of the ammunition that the Conservatives were using, aiming at the election, aiming at the Liberal Party, because Trudeau really was, and I know leaders are always face of the party, but even more so with Justin Trudeau. It certainly felt that way, versus if you go back leaders from various parties over the past couple of decades. So when Trudeau went, that really deflated some of the campaign ammo that was being used. And then the next thing that was addressed was, and whether or not the consumer carbon tax comes back in some reimagined fashion into the future, which it probably is in some form, is once that was axed, there goes another arrow out of the quiver. Then all of a sudden Trump starts babbling on with his nonsense. Then it had a real tough position for Mr. Poilievre, knowing full well that some percentage of his base were supporters of Donald Trump. It would be hard for him to be as forceful as Carney was, as Doug Ford was, as Andrew Fury was, and others, because that really did become one of the key parts of the conversation. So I think a lot of things happened at the same time, and whether or not Mr. Poilievre was actually the right man for the job with the Conservatives, I think there's going to be a real soul search on that side as much as there is in the NDP. So I think there's a lot of contributing factors. I don't know about distraction from the past 10 years because they're well documented. People know exactly what's gone on in the last 10 years. It's some of the so-called devastation and exaggeration. Some of it absolutely is, in my opinion. So that's a bit of a long answer, but I think a lot of things happened.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that there, Paddy. I think, the way I see it is with the carbon tax thing, say people are happy to see that go, and it does take something away from the Conservatives kind of thing. But the way I see that is they had the carbon tax implemented for how many years now, and they took it away. So they're just kind of revealing that we were paying all this extra tax for no reason. So, that's something that would kind of turn me off, and I think you're saying about the leader for the, I think that was a problem for them, I think the leaders that they pick don't have the appeal that, is going to reach a lot of Canadians. But I think what a lot of it comes down to, or the way that I see it, is sometimes maybe a misunderstanding of how our politics work, because I'm sure it doesn't all come down to a leader. They don't have the same executive power that, the president has in the United States. The leader is just the figurehead of the party, what's going on there is a lot deeper in terms of who's behind him, So when I see a new leader come in, I don't see everything's brand new, all these new promises. I'm still seeing it as, well, that's still the same Liberal Party from the last 10 years. It's still mostly the same people working, So I see a new person come in. I don't see things as being that much different, but it seems that to me that's enough for most people to kind of reset, and kind of see it a bit differently.
Well, I guess the results speak for themselves. For the most part. Look, like I said the day after and leading into the election, we really have gone down the path a lot further than in years past with sole focus on the leaders. It's really become part of it. Local politics and local candidates mean less and less as time goes by. And then things like, in the past, we would all be collectively demanding costed platforms. Now nobody seems to care anymore. 7.3 million Canadians voted in advance polls before any party told us exactly what their promises cost. So we really do vote on emotion. We vote on very easy to absorb or to digest things like slogans and signs and those types of things. So things have changed. dramatically. And you're right, we don't vote for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is the leader of the party that wins the most seats. That's it. And they're given the chance to govern. So we're not even completely, fully understanding exactly what this minority parliament's going to look like. But I think you're spot on. The focus on the leaders is a bit misguided. Now, you need to have a likeable, charismatic, well-spoken, thoughtful, intellectual person at the helm of any federal party to have any sense of a chance. But we really got to get down to brass tacks locally. Politics is retail. Politics is local. Well, it used to be. It doesn't seem to be anymore. Last comment on Carney, then I'll give you the floor. It's not that long ago that one of the key aspects of Stephen Harper's background that made him best suited, so said people, to be the Prime Minister is that he was an economist. Well, okay. And then Justin Trudeau stuck his foot in his mouth when he said things like, I don't think about monetary policy, I think about fiscal policy. It made sense because governments don't control monetary policy. They kind of go hand in hand, but not directly. And then Mr. Carney is an economist who was in charge of monetary policy. So some of the knocks on him, and I get it, people were sick of the Liberals, but I think they were as much more sick of Justin Trudeau than they were of liberal government policy. Now, there's lots of it that happened, and lots of it was criticised, and justifiably so. But looks like the addition of Mark Carney and the reappearance of Donald Trump had a lot to do with the results.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like people were really pretty fed up with Trudeau's kind of personality, and I think it'd be frustrating for me if it's seen the same thing happen with Carney, because I don't think I think he's more likable, and I would hate to see him get kind of the same flack, even if I'm not the biggest supporter. But I think a lot of what happens with the politics is people kind of get wrapped up in they're so influenced by the celebrity stuff and social media and everything, and people are not getting information, they're just getting the faces, they're just getting the sound bites, and they see them more as basically a celebrity than somebody who's kind of making decisions and leading the party. But anyways, Patty, good talk. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Yeah, and we, more than ever before, with the advent of social media, more and more voters are simply living in the echo chamber, right? Whichever one they prefer, whichever one makes them feel good, whichever comment they make that gets the most likes or retweets or whatever, and the endorphins start flowing, and then we kind of tune out everything else unless it's exactly what we want to hear, what we want to see, what we want to read.
Yep.
Good to have you on the show. Appreciate the time, Zachary.
Yes, thank you, Patty. God love you.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Anyway, fair enough. Some of the fallout, though, across the country, look, I 100% understand the emotional reaction people have to things as consequential as elections. No doubt about it. Hopefully, just hopefully, I'm not going to pretend Kumbaya is going to be everyone's favorite song on the jukebox tonight, and nor do I think that we're going to see olive branches extended from every hand of 41 million Canadians. But our collective best interests are probably very similar, regardless of where you live in this country. Again, not to oversimplify a complicated world, but people want to be happy, content, and healthy, and have a job, and feel safe in their community. All those very similar things. Sometimes we break it down as if there's such massive, stark differences. It's a fairly nuanced world. Are there differences in the party platforms? Of course there are. But are there more similarities than not? Absolutely. Because no one's going to reinvent the wheel here. And it's also, just for me, and you can bring your perspective for it, we've got to stop pretending that one party or one politician has a monopoly on the good ideas, that one person or party has all the right answers and everybody else is stupid. It's just not like that. We should be able to question any politician on any side of the political spectrum because they're not perfect, neither one of them. And there's not one single politician out of the 343 elected members of parliament in this country that has all the answers. It's just not a thing. Right? Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, Harry's in the queue to talk about the MOU. Haven't had that chat in a while. Looking forward to it. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Harry, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you this morning?
I'm excellent. How about you?
I'm not too bad. Patty, I called you months ago, letting you know that I had gotten a copy of the MOU between Quebec and Newfoundland, and told you I was struggling to get through it and found it very confusing. Well, I think over the months I've finally figured out what the words say, and I still don't have clear of all the implications. So I was wondering, with this surprise change that I guess we thank Mr. Trump for, because he suddenly brought Canada all together, and we've all talked now about reducing interprovincial trade, and even Quebec is talking about oil lines and electrical lines across their borders. I'm wondering if now the Liberals have decided that it's time to have an independent review, just if nothing else, to look at what implications are involved with this new possibly world trading advantage that we will have by having all this electrical power and possible access to the rest of Canada and down the States. I haven't heard anything about the MOU lately. I'm afraid one day I'm going to wake up and find out it was signed.
Well, I've been trying to bring it up repeatedly ever since, and it used to get a lot of traction when it was first announced, not so much lately, but you make an interesting point, and one that I've tried to make here on the show, and I actually asked this question directly of Dennis Brown, who has been appointed the chair of the 3-person oversight panel, and they seem to have a pretty narrow mandate, as far as I can tell, because if we're looking at risks, if we're looking at the changing markets, if we're looking at access to different parts of the country without having to squabble with the province of Quebec insofar as an east-west corridor goes, that does change things. It really, truly does, but it's not currently something that the 3-person oversight panel is even evaluating. But by the time we get to because we're fast-tracking to this being a definitive agreement. I mean, if you listen to the Quebecers, they're saying the same thing. This province saying the same thing. So by sometime in April of next year, this is going to be a thing. So we should be talking about this a little bit more because it has enormous impact. But you're right. If we can't assess the possibility of that east-west corridor and what that might mean for potentially even a bigger financial upside for us, then we have not included all of the variables which we have to.
Yeah. Like to me, and I'm a humble little man, I to this point, the Liberals seem to have done the reasonable things. Like they looked at Muskrat Falls and they said, "Oh my, what a doomboggle," they used to call that. So what they had an independent review done, and just like if I got something new come in the house and it required assembly, the first thing I'd do is read the instructions. So they got advice or instructions from this review, and the first instruction said, don't touch anything over $50 million without having independent help. And they're ignoring the first rule of putting the thing together, is get independent advice, because I have all respect for those people who are appointed on the overview committee. But if I wanted to run a talk show and I got Paddy Daly as a one-man committee to oversee it, but as chairman, I say to Paddy now, listen, I want you to oversee this, but don't have anything to do with the announcers, or don't see how the structure is put together. I'd just like to have you there and make sure people come in and out of the station at the right time. And that's what I feel. They've pulled important people together that Newfoundlanders look and they say, wow, he was involved in the public thing, and oh yeah, he's going to be good. But they haven't told them what we want done. We want an independent review. I'd go further. I don't want an independent review. I want a committee hired to look at that MOU and that agreement from my point of view. If I'm going to buy something from you, I don't hire your lawyer to check out everything. I'll hire my own, and to protect my interest. So I'm surprised that at least they don't say, okay, this is one of the biggest deals we've ever done. We've made a tremendous mistake in the past, and now before we sign it, we are aware that Quebec will have new access because the rest of Canada is opening up, the U.S. is opening up, and now with this new Canadian unity that we got, Quebec may even allow us to put lines across. So that must have some kind of an implication on this deal. So let's get somebody, not Hydro-Quebec, not Newfoundland Light and Power, not Fortis, but somebody who is totally independent, have a look at it from Newfoundland's point of view, but at least as an independent, and say, wow, you know, if they waited until the contract expired, the world is going to be a different world, and they're going to be sticking their finger again, saying, oh, what a rotten deal we signed back in 25. But now we know there's a possibility that something is going to change in the movement of trade within Canada and access to the world. And I really think we should pause, get an independent, and have a look and say, Newfoundland, you know what, this is the best deal you can get because you'll be old and dead by the time they open up those markets. Or look at it and say, hang on.
Yeah, I get the concept of an independent review, and just to pick up on a few things, a few points you made there. You know, the waiting 17 years, what the market will look like then, is a pretty long forecast. We'd be asking someone to incorporate a crystal ball, of which nobody really actually has one. And then it's the possibility of an east-west energy corridor. So we will be asking someone to independently review some hypotheticals. Not that you don't, because that's what a review includes. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, identify the risks, understand the risks. So I get your point. But I think the government made a curious decision on one front. Like prior to this, and I guess we didn't know that this was ongoing for 4 years prior to the MOU coming to pair, but they struck a committee to evaluate what 2041 meant. But they never reported back to the public, because I think there's a vast misunderstanding of 2041, because it's not like all the ownership and equity reverts to this province. It's not that at all. The equity stake remains exactly the same. It's simply be an opportunity to renegotiate price. And when they had all that information from the committee, I think it would have helped to inform all of us, me included, as to what 2041 meant, because without that understanding, it's hard to evaluate this deal. And inside the MOU, to have 4 major projects, the expansion at the Upper Churchill, the possibility of Gull Island, the 2 transmission projects included, that's an awful lot for the layperson to evaluate. I mean, I spent a lot of time reading it and trying to understand it and asking people way smarter than me what they thought of it, but there's a lot. I mean, we're talking about, over the course of decades, some estimated value of $225 billion to the province. It's hard to wrap your mind around. So it's complicated. And even if we're asking someone, is this the best deal we could have got? That simply would boil back to an opinion, though, wouldn't it? Because you could say, no, we could have done better, but done better based on what? And given the fact there's 4 big projects inside of one MOU, it's hard to know where we could have done better on one area or another. Well, at least it is for me.
Well, I guess, because, like I said, I found the MOU very difficult, and in my past life, I used to be a bank manager, and I wondered, like, why was the Gull Island repairs going to be 100% financed? Why were the other ones going to be a joint venture instead of the normal group? And why was Quebec saying, look, you know, if Newfoundland don't want to put any more money in, they don't have to, but we can buy more shares, and I don't know. There's a whole lot in there that is suspicious, and I'm just saying, as an individual, if it were my money and I was investing something, and I don't care how smart the politicians are, or even the review committee, if not given the right mandate, they're not looking for the right things. But somebody should be looking out for my interest as a Newfoundlander and say, you know what? It makes sense. It is probably the best deal. And I know that it's all speculation, but it all boils down to a well-thought-out final decision. And once you make that decision and sign that bottom line, it's no good then to say, oh, geez, we forgot the escalation clause, or you didn't know that you could have access to the rest of Canada with this stuff, did you? No, let's smooth it out first.
There is a escalator clause which was notably missing from the Upper Churchill contract, but it is part of this, and we understand what's going on there. At this point, or up until now, Hydro-Quebec is paying 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, to begin with, in year one, it'd be 1.63 cents, I think is the number that comes to mind. Then an overall averaged out over the course of 17 years, averaged out at 5.9 cents. So those things are built in. Whether or not they're good enough, whether or not it's what we deserve, I'll say, is, I think, once again, boils back to an opinion. But that escalator is actually part of this. And, you know, when they said things like, and this, it wasn't helpful, it's $1 billion a year over the course of the next 17 years. But, you know, to be more accurate, it's an average of $1 billion. So people can understand things a little clearer when we're a little bit more clear in how we describe the different moving parts of a contract, especially when it's as complicated and the numbers are as massive as they are inside this MOU, which I think will become a definitive agreement. All sides are saying it, so I guess we can only take them at their word. Anything else while we have you this morning, Harry?
No, there's so much going on in the world now, it's difficult to analyze. You know, and people have learned how to lie by telling the truth, because what they do is just give you enough of the truth that what they said was true, but in the general context is a lie.
Well, obfuscation is part of the political landscape, that's for sure. Harry, good to have you on the show. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. All right, as mentioned off the top of the program, we're 100 days out from the Canada Summer Games coming to the Metro region, so lots of excitement is boiling up. Joining us on line number one is the Chief Executive Officer of the Canada Summer Games 2025. That's Karen Sheriffs, and then we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Let's take a word to the Chief Executive Officer for the Canada Summer Games 2025. That's Karen Sheriffs. Good morning, Karen. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Happy to have you on the program. While we look down the path of the next 100 days before the opening ceremonies on the 8th of August, important, and it gets kind of lost in the shuffle, this has been a 5-year process. We were awarded the games back in 2000, and it takes all that time to pull off a successful game. So give us a look back before we look down the path of the next 100 days.
Absolutely. Yes, we started this journey. We were awarded the opportunity to bid for the games February of 2020, and around 2-3 weeks later, you know, we were all hit with COVID, the pandemic, and you know, it was certainly a navigation, but a story we will always tell, how we, you know, submitted the technical component of the bid and the comprehensive component, visiting different venues when many venues were, you know, in lockdown or shutdown at that time. So it's been quite the journey to, you know, identify the venues based on the sport program that Canada Games Council set forth for us, and, you know, not just the sport venues, but, you know, the Athletes Village as well, various accommodations, hotels for VIPs, our mission staff, our major technical officials, 500 of them that will be coming from across the country. So, you know, it's been quite a process, and then incorporating as a host society in an incorporated entity in itself, and putting together our board and starting to build our staff team. So it's been quite the journey.
There's a lot to it. I think it's a bigger machine than people realize. I've been to a couple of Canada Games, including 2017 in Winnipeg, and just how busy it is. And it's so much different than any tournament I ever participated in, and where my son participated in leading up to that. So it's just a massive machine. Let's dig into some of the things that are still yet to be fully understood and finalized. So volunteers. 5,000 is a big number. And we understand, I think Carl Smith said that there's some 4,000 have been secured at this moment in time. So we're getting there, and 100 days. What's the plan to secure the next 1,000 that are required?
Yeah, absolutely. We're almost at our 4,000 mark, which is really quite significant. We also need 500 bilingual volunteers to be put in various situations, so various locations. So the plan really is we still have a couple of larger organizations who are implementing policies for their staff to be able to volunteer during the game, some incentives around that. the City of St. John's, Memorial University, and others have already implemented, which is great. Our staff team and a really amazing group of volunteers are at our center on 260 Waterford Bridge Road, our volunteer center. And people are coming in daily. So it's really maybe starting to target a couple of key groups, these large organizations who are still implementing. I think we're going to certainly reach our goal, if not exceed that. We're a little ahead of schedule from past games. But, a lot of interest, a lot of people chatting. There's certainly a role for everyone, 150 different roles and around 31,000 hours of shifts to fill.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there has been some questions coming from volunteers about when the training is going to begin. Because I think at one point people were told it'll be February and then it was going to be March. When is the training going to roll out? Because that's also a compressed timeline for all that to take place.
Yeah, we have a number of people who have already started the training. There's going to be various ways. Some people have started in-person training. There's virtual training options, and there's options for people to do a self kind of regulated training that they, at their own leisure and time, can go through the training module. So we have a large number who have already started that process. And then as, there is a full process in terms of the registration piece, your certificate of conduct, vulnerable sector checks, all that has to be in before that piece can start. So we're working through that, but we are nicely getting through lots of documentation coming in regularly to the office.
I was going to ask about background checks and what have you, because even prior to the games and the volunteer recruitment, there was plenty of concern about the timeline for turnover for applications for criminal background checks at the RNC. Have you heard from volunteers that they are worried about timelines? Because even inside the next 1,000 or 1,000 plus that are required, we're coming up against it. 100 days is not a long time. It's a blink of an eye in reality. So have you heard any concerns being voiced by either your committee members or individual volunteers about that turnaround time?
No, not to date, and I do have to give a shout out to the RNC, who have really been a huge partner with us, very supportive, and have been processing these, knowing what's been coming. We've been working with them for a really long time. So in terms of expediting, moving this process along, they know what was coming from, the start of our volunteer launch last August and into now. Certainly a big push right now, but I can't say enough about the support that we've gotten from the RNC.
Next obvious place to touch down on is infrastructure. I continue to hear one particular piece of infrastructure that people are worried about, and that's the Aqua Arena. What can you tell us? Because, of course, we know that was built specifically for the 1977 games. It was not in a position to be able to hold national events because of some shortcomings deck-wise and other things. So is the Aqua Arena ready? Will it be ready?
Yes, it's well on its way. I'm happy to say, Memorial University is the project lead on this, and they will be giving a much more comprehensive update in upcoming weeks as we near substantial completion. But happy to say the new platform, we added a 3-meter platform diving board. All the platforms are done. New diving springboards, 3-meter and 1 meter in. The deck space, as always, as you drive by, you can see the extension on the front that will house all the offices as we move forward. So much more deck space, new spectator seating, and the mechanical electrical piece was such a significant part of improvement of the Aqua Arena. But, I'll say this is a real gem in Atlantic Canada to have a 65-meter pool with a dive tank like we have. And, we can't wait for this to be games ready and to host competition there this summer.
I mean, the Aqua Arena is a fantastic facility, and I'm glad it's getting this upgrade and a bit of TLC because it hadn't got some in quite a long time, so this is obviously big news. When you talk about leaving a legacy, we can talk about the infrastructure pieces that will remain after the games, which is important for the local sporting community because we needed some work on that front, so I'm pleased. Economic impact.
Yeah.
So walk us through the metrics to come up with a number, because we've heard $125 million. So even for people who are thinking, we shouldn't be doing things like this, there's more important things to spend our money on, But the fact of the matter is, and again, if I'm wrong, correct me, is back in 2000 or 2020 when we were given the games, or we won the bid for the games, that was our last chance because we had backed out of a bid in the past. So if we didn't take the games and bid on the 2020 for the 25 games, we weren't going to be in the fold ever again into the future. So that's important for people to understand. Secondly, is how do you go about measuring economic impact necessarily? I'm not looking for every single specific and deep down in the weeds. Is it based on historical impact in other host communities, or how do we measure it here to come up with 125?
No, it will be measured directly from our community. St. John's, all our surrounding partner communities. We partner up with an organization who does an economic impact study directly during the games time that really looks at, everything from your hotels to your car rentals to your restaurants to the number of people here. Quite a significant, comprehensive research study that gets done during the 18 days during the games, and some information before and after, obviously. But, it will begin. I mean, we're anticipating that 120 is a minimum, and that will be significantly higher.
Anything else you'd like to add this morning, Karen, that we need to know?
Just, if you haven't signed up to be a volunteer, it truly is an experience of a lifetime. This is the largest ever Canada Games to be hosted in the 30 editions of the games. Largest event to be hosted in our province, and we will be unveiling, revealing our medals today by an amazing artist later this afternoon, and all the information, one-stop shopping. Download our app that has all the information, our website, and pop into our volunteer center. It's an amazing opportunity, and June 11th we'll be lighting the torch in Ottawa. So lots of exciting milestones still yet to come.
Where is the volunteer center?
It's on 260 Waterford Bridge Road.
Very well. Karen, good to have you on the show. Keep up the good work and good luck.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Take good care. Bye-bye. As Karen Sheriffs, the Chief Executive Officer of the Canada Summer Games 2025. All right, and I got this pretty saucy text. Now, you can send me a text, but I can't reply to them through my email. So if you like to copy and paste it to an email so I can reply, I'll be happy to do it. And this person is not wrong. They say, boy, every time the topic of the Canada Games comes up, you're sure quick to remind folks that your son played in them. You got that right. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, tons of time left for you. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. This is a question being asked via email. Man, if every email became a call, you'd never get on the show. It'd be so busy. So this was about the political side of the MOU, and that's an important part of the conversation, I would suggest. So the assertion is, what happens if party changes hands in Quebec? And it looks very much like it will. The thought that there might be an election in the fall in Quebec, I'm not so sure that's going to happen because Legault looks like his party is going to be ousted, if you believe the polls, and you know what I think about the polls sometimes. But they don't have to have an election. They're not obliged until the fall of 2026. So you have to consider the fact that if Legault thinks the writing's on the wall, he's going to be ousted, then it seems a bit unlikely that they'll pull the trigger and have an election this year. Same thing could be said in this province, because we are obliged to have an election this calendar year. It's likely going to be sometime in the fall. What happens if government changes hands in this province? We haven't heard that the Tories say that they are, going to throw this deal away or anything of the like. They're pretty much on the side, like Harry Andrews was talking about, is that they've only really talked about the need for independent review. They haven't poo-pooed the deal. They haven't said that they would scrap the deal necessarily. So that political consideration is real, no doubt about it. I don't know if it changes much in this province. And in Quebec, if they don't have to have an election until the fall of next year, then just from my own perspective, just my own opinion, is I don't think they will. Because Quebec is an interesting examination regarding politics. they pretty much have a pretty standard churn of parties. In this province, it's a bit different. We will generally elect a party. They'll serve 2-3 terms, and then, quote-unquote, people get sick of looking at them, and out they go. In the province of Quebec, it's much quicker. They have a very short fuse, does the electorate, for putting up with one party or one premier or another. They generally move parties out much quicker than we do, and it very much looks like they're going to change the balance of power in Quebec when they next have an election. So that's an important point, and I'm glad someone mentioned that. It's also another email came in based on Harry's call about waiting and not rushing and maybe waiting until 2041 or what have you. And then the email also included comments coming directly from one of the vice presidents of Hydro-Quebec, basically saying they win. They're no worse off than we were when they had the very lucrative contract and the terms involved with the Upper Churchill. Premier Legault saying it's a great deal for Quebec and all the rest. And for them, their motivation was clear. The Upper Churchill is 15% of their portfolio. That is a huge number. In addition to that, they're talking about some proposals that have been made by industry, whether it be data centers, artificial intelligence, other industrial and commercial projects, that they simply don't have the power for. So what they wanted, as much as anything else, again, my opinion, was the ability to build the 2,225 megawatt dam and transmission project at Gull Island. They need the power. As much as they need the Upper Churchill to remain in the fold, they do indeed need Gull to satisfy their own political and their own economic issues inside the province of Quebec. So when they say they won, it's the same reason why leaders here, the Premier, Minister Parsons and Carl Smith and Jennifer Williams and others, say we've secured a great deal. So I don't put a whole lot of credence in, well, we must have got rooked because Hydro-Quebec says they have a great deal. Just stand back and think about it. They're hardly going to go back to their home province and say, oh, well, we signed a terrible deal. They took us to the cleaners. We signed it anyway. Too bad for us. So that was never going to be a real thing. They were not going to go back and say anything less than cover the MOU in glowing terms, because that's what people do, especially when we're talking about comments coming from politicians. And I would imagine utilities could be lumped into that in some form. So, yeah, they said they did great. We said we did great, which I think boils back to even an independent review. If the question is, I guess there'd be a bunch of questions, is have we carefully identified all of the risks? Have we carefully considered the shifting markets and the different political realities that may come to bear in Canada? And also, the general question that people ask is, did we get the best deal? And I guess that depends on who you ask, because people tell me I'm wrong, but I'll stick with it because it's what I think, is we are basically asking someone for their opinion. It can't be based on necessarily facts of whether or not you got the best deal, because, again, that would be an assertion made based on one person or one company's opinion on the front. And last one before we get to the break, and hopefully a couple of calls to get us home. When you're talking about something as complicated as 4 major projects being inside of one MOU, and we do know, based on conversation with Dennis Brown and others, this is not going to be one contract. This is going to be like 10, 12, maybe 15 definitive agreements that covers all of the bases of the MOU. So that's also pretty important to add into this conversation. We're not going to have one contract next April. There's going to be a bunch of contracts, because it's pretty much impossible to entertain a contract that it covers 4 different standalone projects. Well, I guess hand in glove, transmission with the Upper Churchill expansion, transmission with Gull Island. And people say, why did we give Hydro-Quebec the full authority to decide whether or not they would advance Gull? If you listen to Michael Sabia, who's a heavy hitter and the man at the helm of Hydro-Quebec, he said there's a 100% chance they're going to develop it. And that kind of stands to reason. If they need the power, it's not like we're creating enough additional capacity at the Upper Churchill to satisfy all the things that they need to power up in the province of Quebec. So I don't think there's a big reason to believe that they won't. And remember, let's say they do build it. $3.5 billion on the table, which basically purchases our equity stake at Gull. And if they don't build it, there's actually a penalty built in and baked into this MOU. $1.5 billion penalty for not building it. That's a big risk to take on if you're not actually intent on developing Gull. And we are way further down the road in developing Gull than many people realize. There's been work ongoing on that site whether it be feasibility and understanding the water, understanding the potential for the dam, understanding the generation. We are well advanced, I think, more than people realize at Galt. So we can factor that in to the conversation as well. Let's go ahead and take a break for the final one of the morning. When we come back, we'll wrap it up by speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Kevin, you're on the air.
How are you today, Paddy?
Doing well, thanks. How about you?
Oh, fantastic. I'll get better, though. Talking about the power and all that, when we get a deal for what our resources, water resources, are worth, I mean, we're over 50 years now with that resource, and hydro at times still come to government with their hand out. Then we done the muskrat, and instead of doing a deal that would actually bring our power rates down, we're paying more. So you would assume that if we're going to get into anything, any kind of power deal, and they're supposed to be there and they're supposed to be a public entity, why are we paying anything for our resource? That should be self-sufficient.
Well, I'm not 100% sure what you mean, but I mean, the bankrolling of the Upper Churchill that went online in '69, I think that's an important part of how the equity stakes were set up and who got what for what price. But people keep asking me, and this is, I think, a very popular question out there, is when we look at what we pay per kilowatt hour on our bills here versus what they pay in Quebec, which averaged out is around 8 cents. Here it's more like 14 cents. And a lot of the implications for increased power bills will be Muskrat Falls. But if I'm Quebec, I'm not getting involved in the Muskrat Falls conversation. I mean, why would they even consider trying to address our own self-inflicted wound here? The only way we're going to be able to address Muskrat Falls-related pressure regarding price is with money that comes in the door. That's all that's going to happen in the future. The only way that's going to be addressed is with any money that the government brings in. So now we're talking about over $500,000 a year between now and 2030 to control the rates, even at an increase annually of 2.25%. So Quebec's not, they don't give a, I almost cursed then, they don't care about Muskrat and what it means to this province, so we have to deal with that on our own.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not where I was going with.
Okay, where are you going?
I mean, that should have been at the top of the mind of the people that went in there and how the rates for electricity are increasing, and they're going to keep increasing because, I mean, it should be a national power grid across the country anyway. But, to get into the Gull Island, I mean, if we're going to get into there, they should be able to turn around and say, guys, look, we're making a deal this time, and we're going to get somebody in here, and at the end of the day, the people of the province are paying nothing for their electricity because we're supplying, half of North America.
Yeah,
electricity that is going through us and through Quebec, I mean.
Yeah, and if Quebec does indeed proceed and develop Gull Island, which I think they probably will, is we only have access to 225 megawatts. That's it. They get the rest. Well, I guess.
And that's something I don't agree with. Again, we're giving it away, but it just don't make sense. I don't see where the good deal is at.
I guess the only part of that people might constitute as a good deal is we're assuming zero of the risk and they're footing the 100% of the bill.
But still, over a period of time, and like I say, electricity is going to be away to tomorrow, and all that stuff. So I mean, it's imperative that they look at that and before they sign off on that. I think that we're doing another Churchill all over again.
You might be right. It's not exactly how I read it, but the Gull conversation is confusing from the onset, given the fact that it's 100% up to Hydro-Quebec whether or not to develop it, which is, and again, they're pretty clear in the fact that they need and want to develop it, and they're going to pay for it and assume all the risk for it, but how much we end up getting in return, and that's where, again, so we're talking about the potential over the decades of what is going to be a contract or a bunch of contracts. We're talking big numbers. I mean, $225 billion, and it's kind of hard to follow the path to that amount of money. But, I mean, it's as big as anything that I've tried to understand in my life sitting in this chair, and I'm pretty sure that I haven't got a 100% understanding of it, to be honest with you. I don't know if anybody does.
And, that's the thing with these contracts, why it's all in the small print afterwards, the stuff that they miss, But the area is, I mean, why give them control of Gull Island? It's like taking a chunk of the island and say, well, look, there's money in the bank down the road, and we're going to give you control of it.
Well, the fact of the matter is, we were never going to develop it on our own. I don't think there's the political and or the individual appetite to take on another mega project unless there was real hard and fast power purchase agreements that, you know, gave it a realistic chance at being profitable so that we wouldn't be on the hook like we are as primarily the only customer of Muskrat Falls Power. So I don't know if we really had the appetite on any front to try to develop coal, as much as that power is required. But unless we had a way around to get it to market, we weren't going to do it. Right? I mean, just like Muskrat is as much a transmission project as it is a hydroelectric dam.
Oh, without a doubt. And my thing is, why not do it on our own and go out there and look for businesses not only here, but I mean, if we don't want to go through Quebec, why not go down to the States somewhere and see there's people down there that would be interested in helping us to build that on a fair and equitable basis.
Yeah, I don't know what that business model looks like, but that just getting the energy to market is obviously not only complicated but extremely costly if we're trying to do it on our own with some sort of maritime links to the tune of 2,000 plus megawatts. That's a pretty big bill on top of trying to build the dam itself and all the moving parts. Kevin, I'm going to squeak on one more call. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, pal.
My friend, you have a good one.
You too, pal. Bye-bye. All right, final word goes to line number 1. Walter, you're on the air.
Oh, Paddy, thank you so much. I'll be very brief. I know your show is coming to an end. Thank you so much for letting me have a quick little chat with you.
No
I
problem.
hope I don't get in too much trouble bringing this up. I'm not speaking in any official capacity on this, but around the city and here in the West End, there's a few little pantries where people can donate some non-perishable food items and stuff to try to assist as many people as possible who maybe cannot get to a food bank or just want to stay in their own little neighborhood. We enjoy doing what we can to help, and I know there's a lot of people who donate to these little pantries. And again, I don't want to get in any trouble, but I just wanted to mention that the folks who donate to these pantries, nobody is well off. Everybody is struggling these days. We're trying to stretch every dollar as we can. And I think what it is when you're at the grocery store and you see something on sale, you pick up 2 or 3 extra ones, and then you make your way to the pantry in hopes that it will provide some assistance to as many people as possible. And there's a bit of evidence that's showing now that in a couple of spots that, maybe it's not being shared like it should be shared. And at the same time, nobody would want the address of anybody who's taking the food. We don't really care who's getting it, but we just like for people to share as much as possible. So if you do find yourself availing of the pantries, simply saying try to take 2 or 3 items that you require and perhaps maybe leave some for another family.
Absolutely. And unfortunately it happens all the time. Just take what you need, not what you want. And there's others coming right behind you that have a very similar need. So just use a bit of common sense and a bit of graciousness when you use these pantries. Fair enough. And one more, Walter, we've got 30 seconds if you want to mention something else.
No, my friend, I would not dare do that. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Great show, and we'll talk again. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Walter. Appreciate the call.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, man. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, I know it's enticing to fill up your trunk with whatever's in the pantry, but there's others coming right behind you. All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands who support the program. And we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.